Hi, this is Kevin with International Dentist Central, and in today's video, I want to talk to you about one of the most frequently asked questions that we get here at IDC regarding one of the most frequently asked questions that happen in your dental school interview. And that question, of course, is tell me about yourself. The question that we often get here at IDC is how much of the response of tell me about yourself should be professional versus personal, or both. What's the proportion look like, and how much weight you should be giving each aspect of this response. Now, there's a lot of conflicting information out there on this particular topic, even amongst interview experts and coaches that focus on, job interviewing and MBA interviewing and all that kind of stuff. But I think before we get into our take on it here at IDC, it's important to step back and figure out, well, what is our ultimate goal with regard to answering this question, tell me about yourself? What is it that we're really trying to accomplish during our response? Now, you might just think to yourself, well, to answer the question well. And of course that's true, but it's not very specific, and thus it's not that helpful, right? Often, because candidates don't really have a clear idea of what the actual goal is in terms of what they need to be achieving with their response, they default to the easiest goal to achieve, or the easiest common denominator, I would call it, instead of the most effective. Now, the easiest thing to do is to simply respond to this question with things that you think are the most interesting or significant about yourself, according to your own story, your own perspective, and your belief system. Now, the problem is that in most cases, this is rarely an effective strategy. Just because something seems important to you and your story about who you are at the time of your interview, it doesn't mean that your interviewer will find it as interesting or significant as you do. In fact, it might surprise you to learn that even though your interviewer has asked you to tell them all about yourself, their actual level of interest in you and who you are is probably pretty low to begin with. Now, that's a bit counterintuitive, I understand, right? You'd think that if someone is going to ask you a question about who you are or about somebody else that they want to know about, the least they'd have is a certain level of interest in the answer to that question, right? Well, not necessarily in a structured interview, which is usually what you're going to be encountering in most dental school interviews. Now, in a structured interview, which is, by the way, something that we go over in depth in the Interview Mastery course, as well as all the other types of interviews, the interviewers are required to ask the same set of questions to all candidates over and over again throughout their day. So the fact that they have to ask you this question of tell me about yourself, usually at the beginning, means that they're also asking, again, everybody else that day, and everyone who's going to come before you and everyone who's come after you, which means that they're hearing a lot of responses to this question. And when you hear a lot of the same kind of responses from a bunch of different candidates for the same kind of question, it actually starts to bore you a bit. An interviewer who's had a long day interviewing candidates might ask you, tell me about yourself, because again, it's the first question on their interview sheet, and then immediately after you start talking, they're off in their own world daydreaming about what they're going to eat for lunch or that night, or maybe an important email that they needed to send off that they forgot to do before coming here. Of course, they're going to do their best to bring their attention back to you and do their best to take some notes about what you're saying, just in case you say something that's interesting, or just to make sure they have some notes about you afterwards. But nonetheless, don't take for granted that just because you're talking, they're paying attention to everything you're saying. Now, how can I know this, and how can I make such a bold statement about this? Well, it's because I served on a number of interview committees working in a university system in California, and I saw firsthand how myself and the other fellow interviewers that were there in the committee, my colleagues, we would just get to this point where it was a little more difficult throughout the day to pay attention to the candidates that we were interviewing the same way we did on the first day of interviews or in the morning even of the day that we were interviewing. So it just happens that over time, as an interviewer, you start to wear out, you start to feel a little stressed given, this isn't your main job, this is just one responsibility that's been assigned to you. And you have other things going on. You have to do tasks that are not getting done right now. It's kind of upsetting your entire flow of work by being a part of these interviews. And so you have to understand that and have a little bit of compassion for the person that's on the other side of the table, that they want to do their best to give you their full and undivided attention, but often they're just not able to. This is an important point, so let's circle back. Again, most candidates will respond to this question very similarly. Why? Because most candidates are not strategically planning out their responses. And so what they end up doing is they give long, overly detailed overviews of their entire life up to this point, including things that they think are interesting and fascinating about themselves, but not everybody does. And you don't want to be that kind of candidate, right? You don't want to be the candidate that sounds like everybody else and who, like everybody else, is forgotten the moment they leave that interview room. So again, what should our goal be with regard to this response? Our goal should be to captivate our listener. Our goal should be to figure out what is objectively interesting about our own story as a candidate, and then tell those things, leaving out the boring stuff. For most candidates, this is going to require some soul searching and some major brainstorming. Because how do you know what is objectively interesting and what is not, right? Meaning that just because you think, again, something is interesting and significant in your life doesn't mean that everyone else will. And so if you're not sure, if you just don't know where to turn or who to turn to, a good place to do this is to ask a mentor, to ask a friend, a partner perhaps. Or what a lot of people do, of course, is they work with us, and this is why we've created the Interview Mastery system. It provides lots of feedback from people who listen to interviewees all day long, and specifically who listen to and interview folks in the international dentist community. So we really do have a good sense of what is common, what's typical, what's interesting, and what's very common. So whichever way you go though, whether you're working with us or whether you're talking to a friend or a mentor, you need to ask these individuals what they think are the most interesting aspects of your candidacy so far, both personally and professionally. And of course, this brings me back to the question that was raised earlier about whether you should respond more with personal things or professional things in your response to this question. So let's tackle that. The first thing to keep in mind when trying to figure out how much personal versus professional is to remember that this program is a dental program. It's about dentistry. So the notion that we're going to spend 50% or more of the time we have to dedicate to this question and dedicate it to just personal things, again, 50% or more is a lot. That's, to me, a little far-fetched, and there might be certain circumstances depending on the candidate where that's appropriate. But in most cases, that seems like a lot. You have to remember who's your audience. Your audience are often dentists, dental faculty, staff or admins or dental students sometimes in your interview. You have a lot of different folks that are eating and breathing dentistry all day long. That's part of their whole life, their identity. And so the things that are going to be most interesting about you, unsurprisingly, are going to be dental related things, right? I've had candidates who in their mock interview spend a good amount of time in this question discussing their personal beliefs, their accomplishments in terms of community service that's not dental related, maybe a weekly class that they teach to their church or to their religious center that they are involved in. Maybe I've heard of candidates really going into a lot of details about their experience as captain of a soccer team or football team. I've had candidates spend a lot of time talking about things they like to cook. And as much as these are nice to hear, these are not what you're being interviewed for, right? we are evaluating you on whether you'd be a good fit for a dental program. And so to start off your interview, which again, that beginning is the most important point. That's the point where you really have to make a dent, make a difference. To start off talking about things that you're not even sure they really relate to, that's a bit of a risk. That said, on the other hand, these programs aren't just looking for dental robots that they don't want to just hear that you're just a dentist, just a dental candidate that has nothing else going on in their lives outside of that. They want to know that you're human too. So it's important to include a certain number of personal aspects about yourself, which the way I would describe that is like adding a bit of texture to a piece of art. It makes the canvas stand out a little bit more. And some of those brush strokes, we kind of like see them in 3D a little bit. That's the purpose of a personal information that you're going to share with them, to give you a little more sense of who this candidate is and who they are outside of just this narrow scope of dentistry. So let's talk about the actual percentage, because that's that question people want to know, well, how much should I give to personal versus professional, right? And so, of course, like all the great, mysteries of life, there's no absolute percentage or number I can offer you that's going to fit everybody. Obviously, everyone's different, and depending on your backstory as a candidate, you may be a candidate whose personal accomplishments and experiences, maybe even struggles and challenges, are actually more interesting in general than your than your professional information. Now, I've had candidates who have been through some really tough things, political unrest and even some war that they've encountered on their way to a dental office as they were practicing. Those kind of things are things that definitely capture the listener's attention because they're so unique and extreme compared to the rest of the candidates out there. And so in some cases, more information about those personal experiences may be warranted because, again, we're doing everything we can to really make ourselves stand out, not just for the sake of something extreme, but if that's our story and that's really what we've been through and come from, it really is important to showcase who we are and the kind of person we are based on the struggles that we've overcome and challenges that we've overcome. That says a lot about our character, and that's something that I think is important to showcase to a selection committee. Now, on the other hand, you may be the kind of candidate who shines most brightly when it comes to your dental-related activities and dental career. And that's fantastic as well if that's the case. Maybe your personal side of things is pretty standard and ordinary. You don't have maybe tons of stuff going on there, but you're really somebody who, again, has done some incredible dental-related things in your career. That's the stuff then that you're going to want to put more weight on during this response. If we have to kind of give a rule of thumb out there, let's just say that it's safe to assume that for most candidates, 10 to 30% of your response can be personal, while the rest probably should be dental related because, again, we're in this dental program here. Now, 10% might mean that you only include a few things about yourself, like hobbies or things that you're interested in. Or you might, again, have a more of an emotional story about a difficulty you've overcome and a challenge that you overcame, and that might take up a little bit more, maybe again that 30%. But as long as you are achieving that goal of piquing the interest of your listener, that's really the overall goal. So as long as you've met that goal and achieved that, then you can move on. Now, there's one more important point that I want to impress upon you when it comes to how to deliver the personal versus professional items that are included in your response. Of course, we've talked about, again, the weight distribution, how much time and energy should we give to each one in terms of your response. But I really want to look at, okay, now we know how much we're going to give. How do we deliver that? How do we deliver that in the most effective and strategic way? Because there are better ways than others to actually present this response. I think the thing to consider here is that you need to win and earn their interest first before assuming that it's safe to present certain personal aspects of your candidacy. And here's a mistake that I see a lot of candidates make. They'll start talking from the beginning of their response about their hobbies, either now or the ones they had growing up, the careers of their parents, the dislikes and likes that they have, their personal beliefs, all without first earning the attention of their listener. So let me just explain it a different way, just in case you're wondering, like, what does he mean by that? I want to say two sentences to you, and they're both very similar, but one has just a bit of a difference. And one is going to be much more interesting, I would say, than the other. And here's the sentence. I have a friend that likes to water ski. And then the second sentence is, I have a friend named Abraham Lincoln who likes to water ski. So why, you can see one sentence there is going to be a little more interesting for most listeners than the other. Why? Because we actually recognize that someone like Abraham Lincoln is an important person that we all kind of have this shared understanding of. Whether we like him or dislike him in history, we all understand that he's an important figure, and we actually have a clear picture in our heads. When I say I have a friend named Abraham Lincoln who likes to water ski, you might actually have a picture of what you remember as an Abraham Lincoln in your head and him water skiing. Maybe that's a little strange, that's fascinating, that's kind of a funky or funny picture in your head, right? That's more interesting objectively than simply the sentence, I have a friend that likes to water ski. Water skiing, a lot of people do it, a lot of people have friends, both of those things are pretty common. But when we add that other element of someone that we all agree is important, the statement thus becomes more interesting objectively. And then I want you to focus on that word objectively, because again, what I think is interesting is different than what most people might. So in a similar fashion, when candidates start talking about personal things about themselves, such as their hobbies, or details about the town they grew up in, or values that they hold, or religious beliefs, before they've actually said something that is objectively interesting about themselves, then it's very likely that their listeners are likely to forget what they have just said. So we have a need to bring in some wow factors into those first couple sentences. We want to start off strong. We want to impress them with things that we know they'll find interesting and significant about ourselves, again, objectively. If what's interesting about you is more on the personal side, then you're going to want to start with personal things. Grab their attention with interesting facts about yourself and your journey so far. And if what's most interesting about you is your career, your dental career, your path with regard to dentistry, then you'll want to start with that. Impress them with some of those wow accomplishments. Then, after you've won their interest and earned their interest, they now think of you as an interesting person. You now can proceed to discuss more of those personal items, such as your hobbies and values and beliefs, those things that kind of help fill out our understanding of you. At this point, if you've succeeded to capture their attention, then these personal things will really help to paint a better and more detailed picture of who you are as a candidate. Remember, be strategic when it comes to this question. Really plan out everything you're going to say. I don't necessarily say word for word, but at least the overall idea, the outline of it. Don't just go in there and wing it. And to be honest, this is the main reason that we created the Interview Mastery here at International Dentist Central. It's to really help candidates with that strategy process to figure out exactly what they're going to say and what they're going to open with during their interviews. Because that opening is one of the most important aspects to a successful dental school interview. So hopefully this gives you a bit of guidance on, again, how to craft that response and how much of that response, tell me about yourself, should be on that professional side versus the personal side of things. So if you have a question or a comment about this video, please do me a favor and leave a comment or a question down below in the comment area of this page, and we'll do our best to get back to you. While you're down there, please check out a very special offer that we're providing right now at IDC. It's a fall 2018 offer that includes some of the very best of what we provide here in terms of coaching, guidance, workshops, everything that you need to get accepted into a US or Canadian dental program, we're providing that. It includes the Interview Mastery course, the one that I've just discussed here. It includes the Bench Test Mastery course. Both courses providing all this personalized feedback from experts, as well as myself and Dr. Alyssa, to help you ensure a success on your upcoming dental school interview and on your upcoming bench test, all that good stuff. Along with that, we offer something called the IDC Insiders, which is a limited program that we have where we, Dr. Alyssa and I, get together every few weeks with a group of international dentists and discuss what they're going through in their journey through this process, answer questions, and provide very powerful and valuable guidance for anyone who isn't just sure what should they do about internships and research assistantships and ensuring that their profile is strong, and how should they go about finding the right opportunities and experiences that really improve and enrich their profile. This IDC Insiders is also a great way to get some feedback on your profile so far, on your application documents, your SOP, your CV, because it also comes with a complimentary one-on-one session with either Dr. Alyssa or myself. So with the IDC Insiders, the archive of all the workshops that we've done through our entire company history, as well as the courses, the Interview Mastery and the Bench Test, we're providing an excellent value that I think most people who are very serious about wanting to get accepted in the next year will take advantage of. You have a few more days. There's a little bit of a counter down below which you can check out to make sure that you're still in time to take advantage of it, but do so as quickly as you can before it runs out. Again, thank you so much for watching today, and we'll see you in the next video.